In this video I'm going to talk about diagnosing an air conditioning fault on a 2009 Honda Accord. So I purchased a Honda Accord a few months ago and I to be honest, didn't test the air conditioning because the car had only done sort of 35,000 miles and I thought, well, it's not going to be broken. But then we had an unseasonably hot day, and when I eventually turned the air conditioning on, I realised that the air wasn't getting cold. You couldn't hear the compressor kicking in, and the other thing is you couldn't hear the radiator fans. So usually on cars, when you activate the air conditioning, you should get some fans starting as well. So then I had to work out what to do to fix it. Now, air conditioning repairs can be very expensive, and it's one of those things where sometimes, especially in England, if your air conditioning breaks, people just won't get it fixed because it's just not worth the expense. It's never warm enough here to warrant spending £1,500 to have your air conditioning repaired. Now, my first course of action was to take it to a local garage to have it re-gassed. So air conditioning systems are supposed to lose about 10% of their gas a year, and if that gas level falls below a certain amount, then your air conditioning just won't turn on. I thought that it was worth spending sort of £50 to get it re-gassed. So I went to a local dealer who said they took out 300 grams of this gas or something, and then they put 500 back in. But they still couldn't get the air conditioning to turn on. Now, they didn't charge me for that service because a lot of these companies have a condition where they won't charge you if they can't actually reduce the temperature by 10% or whatever. But obviously, because they couldn't even get my one to turn on, they couldn't charge me. They then got an air conditioning specialist in to have a look at it, but he couldn't connect the Honda to his diagnostic machine, so he advised me to go to the Honda garage. So then, using forums on the internet and a little bit of other internet research, I found some common problems with the Honda Accord air conditioning system, and I'm going to discuss a few of those now. So the first one that popped up, and it's quite a worrying one, is a hole in the condenser. At the front of the car there's an air conditioning radiator, and I don't really know what the function of it is, but basically it's an important part of the air conditioning system. Now, on the Honda Accord, specifically the 12th generation one, which I think is like 2008 to 2012, this condenser radiator is prone to getting damage from stone chips on the road, developing a hole and then releasing all the gas from the system, requiring I think about an £800 repair. And the reason this radiator is so prone to damage is that if you look at the front of the car, and I'll insert some pictures here, you can see that there's no mesh at the bottom of the car protecting the radiator, so the radiator is quite exposed. So any large stones that flick up from the road could damage the radiator and put a hole in it. Now, I visually inspected the radiator and couldn't find a hole in it, so I thought it was unlikely that that would be the problem. So the other thing I found was that there is a relay, an air conditioning relay, under the bonnet of the Honda, which is prone to breaking, basically. And I've seen some videos of people taking these relays out, shaking them, and hearing that they're rattling, and basically they're knackered. And apparently there's an uprated part you can buy as a replacement. So I thought, well, that's worth a go because it's about £25. So under the bonnet of the car there's the relay, fuse and relay box towards the rear of the engine, and inside that there's a whole load of fuses and relays. Thankfully, on the lid of the relay box there is a map to tell you what each fuse and relay is for. So I was able to identify the air conditioning relay, the one. Sadly, it wasn't the one by Omicron, which seemed to be the thing that people said failed, but it was by Denso, and I've got it here. We can take a quick look at it. And but I thought, well, it's worth replacing anyway. It's £25. It might work. It didn't rattle, the old one, but I went to the Honda garage and bought the replacement and fitted it, and it still didn't work. So then I also swapped the air conditioning relay over with the fan relay to see if that fixed it, because obviously the fans didn't come on and that didn't do it. So I also changed another fuse under there, a kind of standard car fuse. Thankfully there are some spares actually in the lid of the fuse box as well, so that was quite useful. But none of them made any difference whatsoever. So there was one final fuse I could change. I couldn't actually get to the fuse box until I sort of stuck my head under the driver's side footwell and I could just about see it. And there's a fuse in there for air conditioning, So I replaced it with one from the fuse box under the bonnet of the car, and initially I dropped the fuse somewhere and had spent about an hour getting it back again, but when I eventually did change the fuse, it didn't fix the problem. So at this point, unfortunately, I was completely out of ideas, so I booked an appointment at the Honda garage, kind of reluctantly, and they were kind of subtly warning me that it could be the condenser on the front of the car, which, you know, would have been a very expensive repair. And then they phoned me up the day of the appointment and said, oh, we found the problem and we fixed it. But there's no charge other than the sort of investigation charge, which is about £70, I think, because what they found was that the connector to the compressor had corroded. Now, I don't quite know how that's happened, and it sounds, again, like a little bit of a bad design. Maybe water is able to leak into this connector. So they scraped off the corrosion and applied electrical contact cleaning fluid and plugged it in, and everything fired up and worked just fine. So in the end, I didn't have a £800 or £1,500 repair. It was actually just a £60 problem. So if you can actually locate the condenser, which I think is actually quite low in the engine, then it's definitely worth taking a look at the connector. And if you think about it now, knowing that the connector is broken, it sort of makes sense that when I pressed the air conditioning button, nothing happened because it just wasn't telling the condenser to turn on at all. So if my fans had come on, that probably would have suggested a completely different problem. I hope that the cheapest solution that I've talked about today helps you out. And if not, I hope that some of the other solutions help you get to the bottom of why your air conditioning isn't working. Thanks for watching.